We now have a new presidential administration. We have something called the alt-right that a lot of us hadn't heard of just weeks ago. We don't know what do people think in other countries, especially people in Europe who might have lived or grown up in a system where this was real. The this I'm talking about is that. It's next.
I've spent a decade taking a bite out of conspiracy theories, unraveling urban legends, and grappling with worldwide top-secret issues.
I've even racked up some of their awards.
All while ferreting out the bottom line.
On all topics, controversial, bizarre, and taboo. Interviewing movers and shakers, agitators and muckrakers.
But that doesn't answer my question. That is all I'm answering.
With me, Goharrison, as your guide.
Harrison with you, your new best friend, streamcasting and live FM broadcasting from West Coast to East Coast, here and there in a few spots in Europe. This is Goharrison. Many of us, well, how about 7 billion people across the planet, were actually surprised at the turnout in the recent U.S. election. We have this new organization called the alt-right, or alt-right, the old right, or whatever they are. All these things that most Americans had never heard of. We're lucky to be joined today by Jan Tussing. He's an independent journalist, a German journalist, and a filmmaker who has been working with German public radio for 20 years, exactly 20 years now. That would be 2 decades for us Americans who are just learning our math skills. A foreign correspondent for Great Britain, then Western Africa, and until recently for the U.S., based out of Los Angeles. Now working in Frankfurt in the cultural department. You won the LA Press Club Award in 2012 for the international feature category for a report in poverty in Silicon Valley. Poverty in Silicon Valley, not covered on our news. And that's kind of the point, is that our news is missing a lot of the information. And let me just first welcome you and thank you for coming from Germany.
Hi, Harrison.
We have what appears to be a very aggressive administration. If you are Steven Spielberg and you're making a movie and you cast all your actors to be a certain way, that's what your movie's about. So we have an administration who's casting his surrounding characters. A lot of people think it looks similar to what we saw in European history, say, 50 years ago.
70
years ago. American, learning math skills. So, should we just assume that everyone's kidding, or what are you guys saying in Europe?
Well, I can tell you what the reaction was in Germany, and it was pretty fierce. Nobody thought it would happen. Yeah. And then afterwards everybody said, well, nobody thought Brexit would happen, and then it did. So, actually, I think nobody thought it would happen, even though there was a big, everybody was tense. But then afterwards there was a huge shock. And now, since the election, there's nothing else on the news in Germany but what Trump is doing and thinking to do.
Right. We have something here called Godwin's Law, which is whenever you say Nazi or Hitler, immediately people glaze over and you can't talk about anything seriously anymore. It's called Godwin's Law, and it works in the American psyche. The New York Times in 1922 wrote an article about a guy named Adolf Hitler. And they said he's just kidding. He's just stirring up people to get the votes. Once he's in, he's really going to be a nice guy. Then in 1924, after Hitler had been in jail, they said, well, I guess we made a mistake. So our American media is saying, well, let's just wait and see. He's just kidding. He's probably a really nice guy. I wonder, through the European lens, is history maybe repeating itself?
Well, it depends who you ask. I don't think history is repeating itself, but I think there's lots of parallels. And yes, Hitler was elected democratically, and people thought he was just a nutcase, and many people didn't think he would last long, especially the ones who were in power, especially the ones who were aristocratic. Of course, this proved to be wrong. And what I think is very similar, and what I think both people like Trump and Hitler draw on is at the time Hitler said, well, let's make Germany great again, because they had just lost the First World War. Germany had lost so much territories, and they wanted revenge. And I think that's what Donald Trump is drawing on. He wants to make America great again, and he's talking to people who think they are entitled to more. And so there are lots of very dangerous parallels. And I think I mean, what is Trump standing for? I don't know. Is he standing for family values or friendship? I don't know. What does he stand for? And that's the big question for me.
Well, and I don't have that answer, frankly. In fact, nobody seems to when I ask them. But what we do have is this association with something called the alt-right that has, I think, CNN has really made them rather famous lately. From a website called Breitbart, which apparently is the global platform for the American Nazi Party and others. And with that, we see people who want to make America great, and they're actually explaining what that means. That means making America a white European nation again. Get rid of the Jews, get rid of all the brown people, and all the rest of it. So that's a real movement, and it's not a joke. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Hitler, Godwin's Law again, I don't think he actually ever shot anyone himself or tied a noose himself. But he surrounded himself with some very capable players. And here we are just weeks after an election, and thousands of people have taken to the streets. And when it comes to the inauguration, there's going to be tanks surrounding the inauguration because Washington, D.C. is 85% black. I mean, the optics, as the world looks on, I imagine people have to say, gosh, Europe's in the middle. We have Russia on one side, the U.S. on the other, and a lot of nuclear weapons. I imagine that's got to be irritating.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the Steve Bannon, and you mentioned the bright people surrounding Hitler.
Yeah.
Yes, he had somebody called Joseph Goebbels, and he was a master of propaganda, and that's what Breitbart is. It's just fake news, looking honorable, or I don't know what it looks like. I've never actually looked on Breitbart because I think it's right-wing fascist propaganda, and Goebbels was a master in that, and Breitbart, and Steve Bannon, who runs Breitbart, I think he knows how to manipulate very well. And actually, didn't he take credit for the election, having brought Trump into power?
5 years of work, yeah.
And now he's compensated. Now he gets what he wanted. I wonder what his salary will be under Trump.
Well, and also to think that this global platform that speaks to a certain kind of appetite would be based in the Oval Office of the White House, of a superpower, is kind of extraordinary too. It's like putting Goebbels. Well, Goebbels was not allowed to hang out in the Reichstag or wherever, but this guy is right there. So it's a real home run for him. And here's a question about Trump, because we know that he is vociferously capable of screaming and yelling when he's really upset about something. We've seen it 1,000,000 times over. He screams and yells at Broadway shows and gets very indignant about it. But he's very delicately disavows the alt-right, disavows the Nazis. Like, well, oops. As opposed to raging, because we know when he really is upset, he rages. So I wonder, using linguistics or even just visuals, if he's not terribly upset by the Nazis, does that mean, I wonder if he's more okay with them than he says?
Again, what does Trump really think? You don't know. He says this, and then he says that. He contradicts himself all the time. And that's the big danger. Why would he stand for suddenly, tolerance and democracy and pluralism and what have you? No, he stands for what he talked about before. So I think it's going to be very dangerous, especially with all these Nazis now coming out of their rat holes. And what I find very unsettling is when you see all the hate attacks and hatred-motivated attacks that happen in the U.S. right now. I mean, guess what it will be once he's in power on January 20th. The same thing you saw with Brexit, before Brexit and after Brexit. Now you have all these hate crimes soaring in Britain, and that's the big danger. And I think Trump, he's going to be like Pippi Longstocking. He will just make the world as he pleases, and he won't have any resistance by anybody. I think, and I'm worried that he will just place the wrong people in the seats that he needs to gain more and more power. And then when you see what Hitler and the Nazis did, I mean, it was a bunch of crooks, and they just took over all the institutions. And that's what Trump and likes of Bannon and other and Pence will do. They just will place the right people at the right in the right positions, and then get more and more power until a point where you can't swap it anymore.
Well, there it is. We're out of time. But well said. And you know, look, there's people waving outside the window. One of the things that's a real luxury for us is to hear outside voices, because our discourse all happens in America, amongst each other, and we're not taught this stuff in school. We have no institutional memory. We have no history of anything. George Washington never told a lie and rode across the Potomac. That's about it. So we don't really understand this stuff.
Well, you know, I want a last point. I learned a friend of mine voted for Mr. T because she wanted a businessman in the White House. And
not from the A team. That's a different Mr. T.
Yes, and I was shocked, and I don't know how to, talk to her now, because to me it's like a personal offense. She voted for somebody who is against all what I stand for, all my lifestyle. Yet she is an artist, struggling one, and tries to make ends meet in Los Angeles. And I wonder, why on earth would she vote for Donald Trump? And I think there's so many people who just did the same thing, and it's a total confusion in this country where people don't know what's right and wrong. And I think the problem here, what I see from the outside, is that you don't have any compass. North, south, east, west. People don't know where's what, and everybody's talking, and by talking and just not stating the facts, because people don't know what the facts are anymore. Everybody's confused. And what I see when I came to this country, especially since the election, is nobody knows anymore, is he gonna turn America into a fascist state or not? Is he saying things just to gain attention? It's a total state of confusion, and I don't see where the US is headed, nor does anybody outside of the US think where the US is headed. I just feel that you're going to have so many weirdos and fascists and fundamentalists and religious fundamentalists that will undermine what the US used to stand for.
Well put, and I want to thank you so much for coming on. Jan Tussing is a German journalist, filmmaker who has been working with German public radio for 20 years, internationally, all over the place. Thank you for coming in and offering an alternate perspective, a refreshing one indeed, especially from somebody whose country went through this in a very real and material way. So I appreciate your coming on today.
All right.
Harrison with you. Hang on, more to come.